Hi, sweet angel babes. Welcome back to Tea and Glitter, the podcast. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Evelina, better known as Ivy of the Les Vixens. I'm a lesbian burlesque performer and producer, a safe space creator, and this is Life Through the Sapphic Gaze. Side note, every straight person I talk to doesn't know what sapphic means, and it just... Anyway, if you're listening and you don't know what sapphic means, it comes from a poet from like a bajillion years ago. Her name was Sappho. She was from the Isle of Lesbos, and she wrote about women loving women. And so sapphic is a term used to describe women loving women. That's what I am, a woman loving woman. And on this podcast, I spill the tea and give you all that gay girl glitter on how to live a more peaceful, productive, and happy life, leaning more into our authentically gay ass selves, and along the way, I overshare about my authentically gay ass self. And I hope you enjoy that. Speaking of, thank you guys so much for the huge response to my last episode. It was incredibly vulnerable for me to share such a painful part of my history and also to share kind of anticlimactic reasons why I am a sober person. But yeah, it really meant a lot to me how many people resonated with that. And when I started this podcast, I promised myself that I would be honest and open and vulnerable and that I would share things that I typically don't. I'm a little bit of a private person. So sharing on this podcast has been cathartic. It's also been scary and uncomfortable. But yeah, I promised myself I would do that. And boy, do I keep my promises, apparently. Anyway, thank you guys so much for that huge response and all your messages about it. And to those of you who are struggling with certain things, I feel you, I see you, I love you, and it's all going to be okay. Let's go ahead and get into this episode. So aside from straight people not knowing what the word sapphic means, I was thinking the other day about how so many things about being a queer person are hard to explain. Like, unless you've experienced it, it's not something like your average Joe heterosexual is going to understand. Being in queer culture and queer community, I think a lot of what we think and feel and experience is very nuanced, right? Like there are so many things about being queer and sapphic and gay and lesbian and all these things that are hard to explain, but they're just different. They're just different. It's like we're a different font, right, of person. And it's like, how do you explain the differences of a font? And we just feel the difference. It's like we're viewing and experiencing the world through a different lens than other people are. That's a little foreshadowing for what we're talking about today. I don't know if that makes sense, but like the tension, for example, between two women loving women. It's so complex and nuanced and just different. But to put your finger well, sorry, lesbians, fingers. It's fine. Moving on. But anyway, it's hard for someone who hasn't experienced a woman-loving woman situation, someone who hasn't gone through a queer relationship or that queer experience to understand it. Because a lot of what's happening for us is under the surface. I think in heterosexual culture, so much is like blatant and obvious, right? Especially when it comes to things like attraction. We've been taught what attraction looks like through heterosexual culture. And it's often distilled down to the space of like, do I want to fuck this person or not? And I'm sorry for being vulgar there, but I'm right. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. That's how it's been portrayed to us. I think this could be one of the reasons why so many women don't realize that they are queer or lesbian, bisexual, gay, or whatever, because they view attraction and sex and all of these other things through that heterosexual, heteronormative lens, through what's been termed as the male gaze. So because a girl doesn't want to like rip a girl's clothes off when she sees her at like the gas station or something, she doesn't think that she's attracted to women. But that same person experiences a kaleidoscope of feelings for a girl, right? They want to spend all their time with her. They feel happier around her. They want to talk to her. They miss her. They think about her all the time, about her laugh and her hair. They want to know everything she's thinking and feeling. They got her a crystal from the farmer's market. And yes, they might wonder what she looks like in just a t-shirt and nothing else. But it's not this blatant, superficial, immediate, and tawdry thing that we have seen portrayed a million times in movies, TV, porn, media, etc. And while yes, there is definitely definitely a carnal component to sapphic attraction, it's also so much more than that, and so deep and nuanced and complex and soft and hard and beautiful. There's often a slow burn component that is just so damn delicious. And that slow burn is a precursor to the wildfire, but it's just as important to us. It's not the appetizer, it's part of the whole, full, satisfying meal. But also what we find attractive is so different, right? Like what we value in a person over other things, and how we define what is even included in our lists of likes and dislikes. Like I think a lot of things that men debate over when it comes to a woman's attractiveness are things that women just know are like part of someone's body and like don't sexualize that. Like, for example, a dude saying he wouldn't date a girl who didn't shave, right? But for gay girls, like shaving or not shaving isn't even included in the list of things that make someone attractive. And this got me thinking about how we're so conditioned to view the world through the male gaze, and how different the male gaze is from the female gaze, and even more than that, the sapphic gaze, or a term that I have coined and that I have been loving, the lavender gaze. I love that. We're making shirts that say lavender gaze, just so you know. They're going to be so cute. And it's like a play on lavender haze, but lavender gaze, and lavender is like a lesbian gay color. And anyway, you get it. So cute. Lavender gaze. But for this episode, we're going to stick with male gaze, female gaze, and sapphic gaze. And like being a performer, I can tell you that the way it feels to be viewed by a queer girl or a gay girl at my show versus a straight guy is so different. It's insane. Like the feeling, the way it feels is so different. So today I wanted to do a deep dive into all of this. The male gaze and why it's the worst, the female gaze and why it's not quite it either, and then the sapphic gaze. Cue the choir of angels singing. Oh, love it. Sapphic gaze. Mwah. Incredible. And all the freedom that comes with the sapphic gaze. I think a lot of us have experienced or struggled with compulsory heterosexuality. Oh my God, that is hard to say. Hard to live through and hard to say. But I think the male gaze is a huge part of comp het. I know a lot of queer women who feel cognitive dissonance or confusion around a lot of this because of how we've been conditioned versus how and who we actually are. So I hope that maybe understanding some of this might free you from the bullshit and help you find more authenticity in your life and space to kind of explore what you actually want to look like, what you actually want to wear, how you actually want to behave, what you want to feel like in your life, how you want to show up and exist in your life. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. But I do feel like the more we kind of explore our minds and conditioning and what's going on, in our cute little gay panicking brains, the more freedom and space we can give ourselves to disengage from conditioning that doesn't serve us anymore, or from conditioning that's actually damaging to our little sweet souls. For me, coming out had this really unexpected and absolutely amazing benefit of decentering men from my life. And holy shit, did that change like everything. But we'll get to that in a minute. But before that, we have to have a little chat about these concepts of male gaze versus female gaze, etc., so that you can get kind of a better understanding of what the hell it is that I'm talking about and how it has kind of affected you, me, everything, everyone. And I just don't think enough of us are having these kinds of conversations with people. And so just like with comp het, and just like with comp het, we're left feeling off and uncomfortable and not knowing entirely why. But that's why we're going to be talking about this today. This is the kind of stuff that like I like to talk about with my friends or with someone I'm dating, like at a coffee shop, whatever. So I figured having a podcast is like me getting to do that with you. And I think it's important. And I think having these kinds of conversations can really help untangle things, because it's not easy out there. It's not easy to be queer. It's not easy to be gay. It's not easy to be a lesbian. Anyway, I think at this point, most of us have heard of the male gaze. And I say gaze as in Gaze, not as in gays, as in homosexuals. I know that could be confusing considering everything I talk about on this podcast is gay shit. But yeah, so there's the male gaze, Gaze. And then we've heard about the female gaze. And then I think lately the sapphic gaze has been getting a lot of hype, and for good reason. My tagline here on the podcast that I always forget about, but then I try to reinsert when I'm doing these is life through the sapphic gaze. And it's like one of my favorite things in life. And so I Think it's about darn time I'm talking about it. But before we get to the good shit, by which I mean the sapphic gaze, we gotta talk about the bullshit, by which I mean the male gaze. Okay, I'm gonna be your little lesbian teacher and break it down for you. Class is in session, sweeties. Open your books, get your notes out, let's talk about it. And I swear I'm gonna do my best to not go on like a rant or a whole feminist dissertation, but like no promises, to be honest. You know, this concept, the male gaze, it kind of makes me irate because of how much it infects our lives and how so many of us are just pretty much oblivious to it. And I am a feminist theory nerd, and I would love to do a deeper dive into how all of this affects us intersectionally, historically, all of that. But I don't want to lose you as you're on your drive to work or taking your hot girl walk or however you're listening to this. But just bear with me, okay, for a second, because the gravity of the male gaze has affected us in so many ways. God, I'm rhyming out here. And I just want you to understand it, okay? And I have a podcast, so it's what I want to talk about. Get into it. And I promise we'll get into all the juicy stuff about how being a lesbian is the best thing ever and will literally heal our generation. But let me rant for a minute or two, okay? Thanks. Anyway, the male gaze, what is it? Male gaze was a term coined by Laura Mulvey, who was a film critic and media theorist at that. I have a lisp. I have a speech impediment, so having a podcast is sometimes difficult. Hope you guys don't mind the occasional lisp. So Laura Mulvey, film critic, media theorist, she came up with the term male gaze, which was originally about the way that we as audience members view media, such as film and cinema, through the male perspective or through the eyes of men. And this is because we do live in a patriarchal society and media is always a reflection of our society. So male-dominated society equals male-dominated media equals all of us are viewing media through the way that men do. And historically, we rarely get to see a reflection of society through a purely female perspective. And I don't think there's a way to use the male gaze without referencing sexism and misogyny, considering the term is used to discuss sexism in media. So keep that in mind. Like a lot of what we're going to be diving into today is misogyny, but it's the lens and the viewpoint we're talking about today and how that lens and viewpoint and perspective shape society and its effect on women. You know, viewing the world predominantly through the eyes of men has had a profound effect on society. So while the term male gaze originated when discussing film and cinema, it then expanded to include all media and art because the connection in art was so strong. Like literally most of the art historically that we study and revere painted by men. And then of course, because art imitates life and life imitates art, we all started to realize, holy shit, the male gaze is literally applicable to pretty much everything in society, not just media and art. Does that make sense? Okay, but what is the male gaze and why does it suck so much? It sucks so much because the male gaze controls how women are viewed, and this view has disproportionately skewed to viewing women as objects, not subjects. This view of women has positioned women as secondary characters and has made men the main character. And this role of secondary character ends up making it one of subjugation, where we are sexually, socially, emotionally positioned for the entitlement of men. The lens of the male gaze is all about entitlement. Entitled to women's bodies, to our personal space, to comment on our bodies, entitled to discuss and exploit our bodies without consequence. The male gaze empowers men and objectifies women. That's it. That is the base of it. The male gaze sexualizes women and our bodies and empowers men to feel entitled to our bodies. And a lifetime of seeing women sexualized in TV, movies, music videos, art, media, etc. has made us very comfortable with assuming the male gaze. It becomes our default, and it's completely warped us. The male gaze dehumanizes women and minimizes us. Our value becomes distilled down into whether or not a man wants to sleep with us, or what we can do for him and his convenience. The male gaze is all about judging a woman's attractiveness, and how her worth and her value are tied up in her desirability to men and her ability to please men. Our thoughts, feelings, wants, desires, autonomy become second to what men want, second to the main character of men. Entitlement in this case is about disregarding a woman's availability, her sexual orientation, her values in favor of one's own wants and desires. So it's like a guy knowing you're a lesbian and still trying to get you to sleep with him, like completely disregarding your sexual orientation, whether or not you're in a relationship, any of that, because he finds you attractive and he wants to sleep with you. Fuck what you want. Fuck what you've told him. Fuck all of that. It's what he wants. And it's not always physical. It's not always the guy coming up behind you on the dance floor grinding on you because he feels entitled to do that. It's men undressing you with their eyes. It's not valuing women or our accomplishments or our inventions or our insights or our contributions other than how it pertains to the comfort and convenience and sex for men. It's the man who thinks it's totally okay for him to come sit at my table when I'm working at a coffee shop and interrupt me and start trying to talk to me and gets pissed off when I ignore him because he viewed me through the male gaze, by which I mean as something he was entitled to. My space, my time, my energy, my conversation. And it's not just how men act on an individual basis. The male gaze and male entitlement dictates narratives in society. It dictates what's considered sexy. It dictates what's considered attractive. It dictates the role of women in media and art and society, and it gives men all the privilege and empowerment to do to women whatever they want. And while not all men will become rapists, it is also at the root of rape culture. So with media, art, TV, movies, advertisements catering to men and their desires, men assuming that things are always for them has become indoctrinated into our general society's psyche because everything has taught them that everything is for them. So men start assuming that women in real life are dressing a certain way for them, that they're behaving a certain way for them. Me sitting at a coffee shop and working, and that man assuming that the only reason I am there is for him to come hit on me, that I left my house that day with the sole purpose of being there for his pleasure, as if wearing a tank top was for him to check out my body and not just because it's hot as fuck outside. And a lot of this is not conscious thought, right? Like these dudes are not out there thinking that. They're not I mean, if they were, hopefully some of them would be trying to evaluate their lives and themselves. But a lot of this is just this programming that affects us all. You know, the male gaze is not an outdated myth, and it's not an indictment of individual men, right? Like, I'm not like, oh, F you for like, whatever. It's a larger issue. And it's a very real thing that like molds our perceptions, our perceptions of others, and our perceptions of what normal interactions are supposed to be like. For example, being told to smile by a random man on the street. That is literally that man telling you to stop what you're doing and perform for him. Fake an emotion so he can be pleased. It's absolutely disgusting, but it's become so normalized. And that man feels entitled to your smile, to your time, to your emotion. And side note, I think this is one of the reasons why lesbians are so petrified of approaching other women, because we have been made to feel so uncomfortable by men's unwanted advances, and we would never want to make another woman feel that uncomfortable or like a piece of meat the way that men make women feel. So even though we are not predators, statistics show that men are. And so when we do something that is parallel to what a man would do, it makes us feel really, really icky. But we've also internalized the male gaze in so many ways. It becomes the lens through which we as women view ourselves. It becomes the lens through which we view what is sexy. It's how we learn to be attractive, or how to attract, or what is attractive in general. And then we find ourselves doing things that if left to our own devices, we might not do, like getting boob jobs, or shaving, or wearing miniskirts and high heels. Not to say that these things are only for the male gaze, but when we're not aware of these things, when we're not aware of what's going on in our own brains and the own conditioning, sometimes we do truly fall into these behaviors that are created by this male gaze lens by default. It's very similar and along those same lines as compulsory, God, why is it words? Compulsory. Why am I trying to add syllables to it? Compulsory heterosexuality. Oh my goodness, which I do want to talk about at some point, because it is very, very aligned with this topic, right? Like we're doing things based off of heteronormative societal expectations, and the male gaze is a big ass part of that. You know, and trust me, I love wearing like cute dresses and heels and all of that, but there was a time when I was doing it not because I wanted to, but because I was expected to. So that's the difference. There is a difference there, and there's that nuance that I was talking about. You know, my best friend and I were just chatting about all of this, and she said, I think a lot of people are super uncomfortable and they don't even know why. And this is why. And she's so right, you know? I also saw a TikTok the other day, and this girl was like, I'm a lesbian, and this guy asked me if I would date a girl who didn't shave her armpits, and I told him I would. But then he asked me if I found it attractive. It's just body hair. Why does it have to be attractive or unattractive. It just is. But that's the thing under the male gaze. This very neutral thing on a girl's body now has to be determined if it's attractive or not to a man, if it makes a girl more or less fuckable. So girls shave their pits and they shave their puss, even if it gives them hella bad razor burn and hurts and makes them feel super uncomfortable. But of course we say, oh no, it's more comfortable to not have the hair there. But I feel like we only say that because we've been conditioned to say that, because I don't think a shit ton of razor burn is actually more comfortable than body hair, right? You know, are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you starting to kind of get a visual for what I'm talking about and why it kind of affects us subconsciously? Some of you might be thinking, God, this girl is being dramatic, but I'm really not. I'm really not being dramatic. I mean, I might be a little dramatic because that's just my personality, but like, I really do think the male gaze is systemic in similar ways to like how racism is systemic, because it's pervasive, it affects everyone, and it oppresses some and benefits others, like any of these systemic issues that we have in our society. And the groups of people who benefit most from these things don't even see it themselves. It's completely invisible to them. It's just how it's been their whole lives, and they've been benefiting from it for so long that they don't even know anything differently. And there are some who are so convinced that these things don't exist that they try to convince others that they don't exist. Because the best way to keep a privilege is to gaslight those who are oppressed into thinking they're not being oppressed. And while I can give you examples all day long, I know the concept of the male gaze will still feel like an intangible concept to some of you. And you might experience some cognitive dissonance, which I'll touch on in a second, about men in your life that you know who are great, and also misogyny and all this other stuff that I'm talking about today. But the male gaze has real psychological effects on women. Constantly being expected to perform, to be sexy, to be considered fuckable by men, all of that is exhausting. A 2011 study conducted by the American Psychology Association stated, quote, mere anticipation of the male gaze increased self-objectification in young women and led to greater body shame and social physique anxiety when compared to participants who anticipated a female gaze or no gaze at all, end quote. Due to the prevalence of the male gaze and just the way our society is set up with men as the main character, women as secondary characters, women have been implicitly trained to perform for it. Smile, dress pretty, be a lady, be skinny, but not too skinny, have big boobs, have a big butt, but don't care too much about your appearance, but don't be hairy, and be polite, and look how others want you to look, and be super sexual, but don't be a slut, and be smart, but not smarter than men. And you know how it goes, on and on and on. This like constant messaging that just fucks with our heads. It's, you know, these expectations that are set for women, and if we somehow fall short, it's our fault. And once you're trained to do something a certain way, it's really difficult to change your behaviors, and they're not going to change overnight. But realizing that these things are habitual, they become habits, you know, just the way we behave in society, how we perform for the male gaze, you know, it can really be damaging. It can really cause a lot of problems for women. And it does. It really affects women's mental health. And it's something like I talked about at the start of this episode about how some things are like hard to put your finger on of like what's going on. That's why I wanted to talk about this, because the differences with the male gaze, the female gaze, the sapphic gaze, they're so nuanced, but they affect us in so many different ways. When our value as human beings becomes wrapped up in our value to the male gaze, like that has a huge mental health effect. And not a good one. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, it's not a good one. It doesn't make us feel good. You know, like what does that do to society? And I could easily continue to talk about this, about how the male gaze has affected us intersectionally, historically, how women have been treated, how this all ties into the patriarchy and gender inequality and rape culture and all of that. But I feel like at this point, you get it, right? You understand the male gaze enough for me to move on, right? Like you've picked up what I've put down and we can like move forward with class. Yeah, cool. Because I would like to move on because I don't like talking about men. Okay, so now the female gaze, right? The female gaze is a little different. And some have argued that the female gaze is really just the male gaze in disguise, because women still do tend to judge and assess other women based on the other's apparent desirability to men, right? It's like I talked about earlier, how we've kind of internalized these misogynistic views and ways to look at other women and ourselves. But I think it can be summed up, like when I talk about performing in straight clubs, I really feel like this sums it up, right? I always say performing in straight clubs, the men are gross and the women hate us. You know, women feel competitive toward other women. But like, girl, trust me, I am not trying to steal your man. I don't even want your man to look at me. All right. Let's talk about that for a second. I hate when men look at me. It honestly ruins my day. I feel so incredibly uncomfortable when men look at me, like, especially strangers, because there's this like underlying predatory energy, that entitlement, that feeling that they're thinking something gross. And I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. You know, it's almost instinctual. It's this fight or flight feeling, this like my skin crawls, like I'm just like, ugh, don't look at me. You know, and like I've realized that I will not wear certain outfits and certain things just out and about in the world unless I know I'm going to be with women, you know, specifically with sapphic women. Like I've got some cute ass outfits that I only feel comfortable wearing if I'm going to be around other gay girls. Like I don't want to be wearing these things out and about because the way men make me feel, they make me feel so uncomfortable and they're leering and they like get up in your space and it just, you know, I'm on the road a lot, right? You know, I'm driving all over. I'm like a sparkly trucker just on the road all the time, going to my gigs. And you know, I always want to be comfy on my drives. And because I live in Florida, the comfiest thing to wear is often like a tank top and biker shorts. But I will always have an oversized hoodie and a flannel that I will put on when I stop at a gas station. And if I'm driving home from a gig, I will always take off my lipstick before I stop at a gas station. I won't smile at men or say hello when I'm walking down the street because you just never know if that's going to encourage a man to now approach me or follow me or assume that that was an invitation to invade my space. I'm in the minority of women who have never been essayed by a man, and I still feel this way. Like I'm a lesbian. I am in no way for the pleasure of men, whether that be the viewing pleasure, the sexual pleasure, whatever. Anything for men in a sexual context. No. God, I feel for straight women who have to go out into the world and try to attract the number one killer of women, which is men. Oh my God. People are going to say I'm a man hater after this episode, but like I'm not. I am not a man hater. I don't hate men, okay? I hate what the patriarchy has done to men as a whole. I do know a lot of good men, and I'm sure you do too. I'm sure we've all had tons of positive interactions with men, with family, with friends, etc. There are a lot of good men out there, and part of the reason why the male gaze is so awful is because it alienates those men who do truly respect and care for and love women. And this can create a lot of cognitive dissonance, right? In our brains, because we can know and experience all this misogyny that I'm talking about today, and all these men who make us uncomfortable, and all these men who do not good things to women, and all these men who make us really fucking uncomfortable. And yet at the same time, we can also have positive experiences with men in our lives. You know, these two things can exist at once, but that does make our brains hurt. But even the good men will still see the world through that male gaze, through that tainted lens, because their entire world has been served to them through a man's perspective. From movies and TV to porn to art to boys will be boys. Think about the idea of locker room talk when men are just with men. And that's so normalized. How many times have you lost a guy friend because he realized he wasn't going to get to sleep with you? You know? How many men have completely disregarded your orientation or your relationship? How many men have made you feel uncomfortable? All because they view you through the male gaze of entitlement. You know, these are universal experiences that women have had across the board. I don't think I've ever met a woman who has never had a man make her feel uncomfortable. I think every single woman I have ever met in my entire life has been made to feel uncomfortable by a man. Think about your own life and your own experiences and what your gut has told you, and whether you've felt comfortable or uncomfortable. Think about the times in your life where you felt like your body or your looks were being assessed without your consent by men, or your space invaded, or a man feeling entitled to something that is yours and not his. Even when we're children, boys pull our hair on the playground and we're told, oh, that's because they like you. So we're taught from childhood that boys can hurt us, touch us, do what they want to us because they like us. I've experienced 1,000 instances like this in my own life, and it's very, very clearly illustrated in my burlesque career as well. So I started my career performing in gay bars for queer women. Like that's how it all started. And that's my mission, my purpose, all of it, right? Like performing for queer women. You know, that's the fuel behind my career. But I do love, in general, being a burlesque performer. Like, I love that so much. So I also perform with other productions. I get booked by other producers that have more of a mixed crowd or a heterosexual crowd. And then, of course, so a lot of the shows end up being mixed, you know, with like queer people and straight people having a gay old time together. Because let's face it, A queer party is the better party. I'm not going to lie. It's the better party. We all know this. Not a secret. It's a fact. So I have experience performing in front of sapphic women, bisexual women, trans people, straight people, old people, young people, gay boys, straight men, straight women, queer people, everybody. I've performed in front of everyone pretty much at this point. And at the start of this episode, I talked about nuance and feeling and energy, and there is a stark difference when performing for different types of people. Sometimes it's the context, right? Like a club versus a theater. Sometimes it's the individual, like a gay girl versus a straight guy. And sometimes it's the night, a queer night that I'm at the helm of, versus like a straight night that I just got booked to be a go-go dancer at or something like that. And my sweet angel babies, it is so different when it is predominantly a crowd of queer women. Like, it's safe and sexy and fun and kind and giving and loving. And there's such a level of respect. Like, you can feel the respect and admiration just emanating off of these queer women. It smells great. It smells like cotton candy, and it just feels good. It just feels good to be performing in front of those people. The energy exchange feels good. The way they're looking at us feels good. It just feels good. It feels electric. It feels so nice. It feels so good. And then there's like the straight guy who thinks that they can like touch us or grind on one of the girls in the audience or get on the stage, or like they stand there and they like lick their lips. Ugh, gross, disgusting. Or they stand there with their singular dollar bill and they're like, work for it. And it's like, ew, go away. Ew, you're so disgusting. Be so for real. It feels predatory and it feels icky and it does not feel good. Remember when I talked about how good it feels to perform for queer women? Performing in front of a straight guy, not good. Does not feel good. No. It makes my skin crawl, and especially because it's not for them. It's not for them. And yet they assume it is. They assume I'm dancing for them. They assume the girls in the room are fair game for them. They even have the audacity to assume that we will give them a lap dance like we're giving to the gay girls. I can't. But literally that's how they've existed their entire lives. Literally having everything catered for them. So even when they are in a space that is explicitly stated to not be for them, they still behave as if they are entitled to that space and to the people in it. And well, yes, of course, there are straight men who come to our shows who are super respectful, lovely, wonderful. We love them, allies, yes. I know a bisexual girl, she brings her husband, he's wonderful, very respectful, she has a great time. We love and support those types of men, but those types of men, they're not the norm. The creepy, weird straight dudes who overstep and make us feel icky, they far outweigh the respectful ones. And this is one of the reasons why I do what I do, and I do it as loudly and proudly as I do it. Because we need spaces that are just for us, that are just for queer women, that are for women loving women. That's why I do this, because we need those spaces. Because out in the great wide world, that we don't have them. We don't have them. The great wild world is the male gaze. Everything is for the men. Everything is for the men. Even in the gay community, I'll tell you what, how many nights a week do women get versus how many nights a week do men get? All right. Your Honor, I rest my case. But you know what? We are for the sapphics. We're for the women loving women. We're for queer women, bisexual women, trans women. Like, we're for the women. And I even make announcements at my shows like, men, move, girls to the front. And the way women react to having their space reasserted for them is just incredible. Like, watching them feel like, oh shit, this is actually for me. Like, she means it. She's literally telling that dude to move so I can be up here, so I can have a better spot. So because this dude's fucking 6 foot tall and I can't see over him anyway. And men don't even, they never think about that. They don't think about the girls in the back who can't see over them. I'm getting fired up, guys. I'm getting fired up. I told you I wouldn't rant, but when girls feel like the space is safe for them and that it is for them, gosh, you should see them light up, man. You should see them blossom. And burlesque as an art form has given me back so much agency over myself and my body because I control every reveal and every moment. No one's telling me what to wear or what to take off or when. And you don't get to see what's under my glove or my corset until I decide. And maybe I won't ever take them off. Maybe I'll do the whole performance with my glove still on and you never get to see my wrist. You don't get to see what my hand looks like. My body, my choice. And that's one of the ways that I have broken free from the male gaze. And I know a lot of this is it's like intangible, it's not concrete. It's kind of these just feelings and nuances, but that's life. That's what life is made up of, you know? And I do think that a lot of this is really deep ingrained in us and in our society, and it's hard to navigate. It's challenging. But when I tell you the freedom that I have gotten from acknowledging these truths and then kind of retraining my brain, gosh, it's been expansive. Like my life has gotten so much more beautiful, more authentic. It feels safer. It feels better. It feels good. And something that has helped me do this in all aspects of my life and to gain the confidence to do it boldly is the fact that men have been decentered from my life. You know, society and the patriarchy centers men, like in our world. Men are the center of it all, especially cisgender white straight dudes, like especially them. Oh man, they are the center. Being a lesbian, I have zero use for men. You know, it's wonderful. Zero use for men. So that means that I don't have to focus any of my life on or around men. I don't have to dress or behave in a way that is attractive to a man or that attracts men. So I've started to be able to dismantle, if you will, what being attractive means. I've started to be able to dismantle what is attractive to me versus what I'm supposed to find attractive. Like, for example, straight women do nothing for me at all. Because like the number one thing that I find attractive in another woman is if she is gay, that she's not centering her life around men, that she dresses in a way that's comfortable to her and not necessarily appealing to what a man wants. You know, like straight girls do not even read on my radar. What is intoxicating for me is queer energy. Like, you know, women loving women, whoo, sapphics, bring it, yum, yum, yum. Queer women, that's what I want. Straight women, they do nothing for me. Nothing for me. Straight girls, sorry about it. You do nothing for me. One example of this, talking about like what I, as a lesbian, like the expectation someone might have of me. So I work at Medieval Times. For those of you who don't know, I play the role of the queen at Medieval Times. And at the end of the show, the queen, me, and the champion knight go out into the audience and we choose someone to be the quote-unquote queen of love and beauty, and they get a sash and a tiara, and it's super cute, and I love it. Most of the times, the knights don't care who to pick. They don't care. So they let me pick, and that's when I pick the nerdiest kid in the entire building. You know, the little kid who never gets chosen for anything, the one who gets overlooked, the one who is like just the nerdiest little sweetie angel baby, and that's the one I always go for. But when the knight does want to choose for himself, 9 times out of 10, it's the hot blonde in the front row with the big boobs and the boyfriend. And also 9 times out of 10, the knight is always like, oh my God, you're gonna love my pick for tonight. You're gonna love it. Just wait till you see her. Because they know I'm a lesbian. So they assume I'm gonna be into the hot blonde with the big boobs who's been making out with her boyfriend all night. But the guys all assume that because I like girls, she like girls, so she's probably gonna like this hot blonde. Like, no. That's an expectation you have. That's very male gazy, my friend. But I don't think any of the knights could really understand this entire podcast. So no offense to them. Some of them, great guys, but they are the epitome of what I am talking about today. But again, I think this expectation is another reason why a lot of queer women don't realize they're gay, because straight girls do nothing for them. But like, no, Chad, I don't want to make out with your clearly straight girlfriend because she only wants to make out with me to please you. Ew, get out of here with that. Stop fetishizing this. Ugh. Side note here to the bisexuals or the later in life lesbians who make out or have made out with girls when they did have boyfriends. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the girls who are only kissing other girls because boys told them to, or because boys think it's hot. You kissing a girl when you had a boyfriend because you were like figuring shit out. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? Like, you keep kissing girls. I'm talking about the straight girls who literally are not gay at all, not queer at all, who are only making out with other girls to get boys off. Ugh, so gross. So that dismantling that I was talking about earlier of what society and men find attractive versus what we might be attracted to, you know, dismantling those expectations of ourselves and starting to kind of dig into like, okay, what do I actually find attractive? Like, that starts to create space to discover what attraction actually looks like to you through the sapphic gaze, not the male gaze. And what I have found is that viewing myself and other women through the sapphic gaze is a softer, sweeter, and safer thing. The sapphic gaze sees women as people, as the main character, not a secondary character used for the plot line. The sapphic gaze respects a woman's autonomy, her personal space, her orientation. The sapphic gaze sees women as sexual, sensual creatures without sexualizing them. The sapphic gaze gives us the freedom for us to decide what we think is sexy, what our desires are. And yes, of course, because we've been socialized through the male gaze, a lot of this can be challenging. And that's not to say that sometimes what men find attractive is not what a queer woman would find attractive or what women would find attractive. You know, some of you might lose your shit over the hot blonde with the big boobs. You know, she might actually be your type, like a high femme girly. You know, I get that. But so much of this is nuance, and I don't want you to get bogged down in these specifics. We're talking bigger, larger picture. You know, for example, body diversity. It's not women out there deciding that the only way to be loved is to be thin, right? You know, we can all agree that the beauty standard is thin women, right? But who set that beauty standard? It wasn't women, I'll tell you that much. Women did not start fat shaming and slut shaming. That was not us. That was not us. That was not us. So when you get into a space where women are getting to decide for themselves, free from the male gaze and free from society's expectations and assumptions, I think a whole world of possibilities open up. And then we ourselves blossom because we don't have to fit these narrow parameters to be sexy or to be loved. We become valued for more. Our bodies can exist differently, more naturally, more comfortably. An example of the freedom that comes with the sapphic gaze is body hair. And I know some men love body hair, they're totally fine with it, but I'm talking about society's expectations of women, okay? Remember I said don't get bogged down, because I know there are outliers and whatever, but we're talking about larger perspective and society's expectations of women, okay? People I've dated in the past have experienced a lot of discomfort and razor burn when shaving their nether regions. But I have always told anyone I'm dating that for me, it's good. Whatever form it takes down there is good for me. Like what I think is super hot is a girl feeling comfortable in her body, whatever that means. And if she wants to shave or wax, have at it. If she doesn't, all good. Whatever you're feeling doesn't affect how I feel about you. And now me creating that space free of expectation, letting her know that she has full autonomy over her body and that it will not change her level of attractiveness to me, gives her now the opportunity to explore what is most comfortable for herself, instead of defaulting to society's expectations that a woman needs to shave. And most of those girls did realize that they actually didn't want to shave. And so they stopped. And they no longer had to battle razor burn and feeling so uncomfy all the time. I was literally talking to a guy friend of mine the other day, and we were discussing this exact subject. And he said that for him, it feels more quote unquote clean when a girl shaves down there. And I challenged him on that. You know, I was like, okay, what is this connotation that you were unconsciously giving to these girls? That they're dirty if they don't shave down there? Like, think about that for a second. And is it actually more clean? Is it actually more dirty? Like that's absolutely completely arbitrary. Just think about that for a second. Why do you feel that way? Why did you use the word clean? Why did you feel like a girl would be dirty if she didn't? Like, what has convinced you of that? And do you actually feel that way? Like, and I know a lot of this is like subjective and nuance and all of that, but that's what life is. Life is all about these nuances with experience and the way things make us feel. It's about our energy and our instincts and how we've been socialized and how that can be counter to what we actually feel, how we actually want to be. Since coming out and decentering men from my life, I've realized so much about the male gaze because when I could take a step back away from it, I could see it so much more clearly instead of when I was in the midst of it. Does that make sense? Like when you're in the fog, you can't see, but when you step out, you can see where it is. You can see it all. And you get a lot more clarity when you can step out of it versus when you're just like really in the middle of it. And like men are so in the middle of it that they can't see the forest for the trees. You know what I'm saying? They're in it. But so much of the male gaze has affected me It's affected the girls I've dated. It's affected the expectations that society has of me and of women. I've seen how much the entitlement of men has made me feel uncomfortable. There's so much wrapped up into it. There is such a difference in objectifying women versus empowering women. You don't have to objectify and sexualize her just because you're attracted to her, right? You know, it's nuanced, but it's something we can feel clearly. Like I can feel when someone is attracted to me versus when someone is sexualizing me. I can feel those differences. And it's like even when I'm performing with women, I can tell when a woman is viewing me through a sapphic queer gaze versus a male gaze. Like I can still feel it because a lot of times lesbians have modeled their personal masculinity off of toxic masculinity because that's what they've been shown means masculinity, right? Like that's the model. That's the example that they've been given, whether that be growing up, whatever. And so then they embody that toxic masculinity. So these women who are gay women are emulating that entitlement and that sexualization at my shows. Like I can see it, like they're the ones standing there licking their lips and like trying to touch us inappropriately or like grabbing us or trying to make us like grind our hips on them or whatever. Or they're like air humping. Like, you know, you get the picture. You've seen those girls. If you go to my shows, you've seen them occasionally. And it's like, dude, you don't have to be embodying toxic, gross, icky masculinity to still be masculine. Like, trust me, you can be masculine and respect women. Like you can be masculine and not objectify women. You can be masculine and still view women through a sapphic gaze, right? So even in the queer community, even with women who are gay as fuck, the male gaze still encroaches if we're not actively aware, actively breaking away from it. You can be masculine and not objectify women. Trust me, it's possible. You know, and we're not going to break away from the male gaze in one day. Like this is part of society, right? But it's really up to us to start being aware of it and then start to do some inner exploration, right? To like kind of see what's going on. You know, what's going on in there? What's going on? Am I actually attracted to that? Or am I just expected to be attracted to that? How am I perceiving that woman? How am I perceiving myself as a woman? How am I perceiving other women? You know, maybe we can find areas in which we can reclaim some of this, right? And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Like, I love wearing lingerie. I feel sexy as fuck when I'm wearing lingerie in front of women. When I'm wearing lingerie in front of men, I feel icky and I want to put on a parka and leave. And while yes, that's hugely related to the fact that I am a lesbian, but being a lesbian has given me that space to explore these kinds of things because like I don't need men to find me attractive. I don't give a shit if they do or not. You know, their opinion on my level of attractiveness means nothing to me. You know, so being a lesbian has given me the actual space and freedom to break away from the male gaze in so many ways. But you don't have to be gay to do this. You don't have to be bisexual, woman-loving woman, sapphic, lesbian. You don't have to be. Straight women in general, can start to see some of these knee-jerk default ways we view women and ourselves. And then we can challenge them. And that makes all the difference. Even when I'm performing for a straight crowd and the way the women look at me, like I said earlier, the men are gross and the women hate us. Like the women like clutch onto their men and give me dirty looks. And it's like, honey bunnies, I don't want your man. I don't want you. I'm just trying to entertain, like loosen up, have a good time. Don't see me as a threat. See me as an entertainer. See me as a human. See me as a person. Like I see you as a person. You see me as a person. Let's vibe on that. You know, when I started this episode, I talked about being a queer person, how nuanced it all is, and how if you know, you know, if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to explain. But I hope I did a good job today of explaining all of these concepts. I hope you enjoyed class today. You're all great students. Everyone gets an A plus and little star stickers. Everyone gets that because you all deserve it. But thank you for sticking it out with me. I know this was a longer episode. I hope you enjoyed it. My next episode I'm excited about. It's about, I think it's going to be imposter syndrome and like comparing yourself because that's been a topic on my brain lately. And I would love to chat about it with you. Love you all so much. Thanks for sticking it out. If you liked this episode, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you watched, if you don't like it, keep that to yourself. I hope everyone has a beautiful day or night or whatever. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I will see you in the next one. And I miss you already. Gosh, I got to get started on the next one because I want to hang out with you again. But yeah, let me know if you like this episode. Also, let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about. I know some of these episodes have been a little heavy, but like, whatever, get into it. We're not just going to be fluffy. There are other fluffy pop culture comedy lesbian podcasts that you can listen to, but I like to talk about the real shit. And I think that it's important. Okay, I'm done talking. Anyway. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I love you, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode. And see you at a gay bar soon. Love you. Bye.